If we're witnessing a crisis in capitalism at the moment, you might think of it as being a good time for the left. More than 900 people attended the recent conference on the idea of communism, organised by Birkbeck's Institute for the Humanities in London. It attracted delegates from all over the globe. But has the left come up with the answers the world needs? I caught up with one of those 900 delegates, Slavoj Zizek, the celebrated Slovenian philosopher, who's sometimes considered uncompromising left-wing. I asked him if this crisis in capitalism meant it was a good time to be one of his persuasion.
Well, it is an interesting time, but probably we all know that wonderful Chinese proverb, a curse, when you really hate someone, you tell him, may you live in interesting times, no? Because you know what's the problem? The problem is that what happens when there is a crisis? I want to just to draw to you attention to an interesting detail. We nonetheless can learn something out of this crisis. Do you remember when the crisis first exploded? At that time still, Bush, the president, addressed the American people. How similar the rhetoric was to the one he used after September 11th. Like, we should forget partisan divisions, our very way of life is in danger, we must act united, and so on. And did you notice how democracy was, of course, not formally, but de facto almost cancelled briefly? Like, you remember the first vote in the Congress for the bailout? It was 2/3 against. Then all of them got together, Obama, Bush, McCain, and basically, frankly, the message was, look, cut the crap. We need this. The joke is over. And it was done in 1 week. And that's another point that I want to make. The priorities were set straight in the sense of, you know, we know AIDS crisis, poverty, whatever you want, ecology, that can wait. Save the banks, it has to be done instantly.
Right, so you're saying that the right will always manage to make an opportunity.
Not always. It's an open situation.
But isn't the situation here that the left, for it to be the death of capitalism or the end of capitalism, there has to be a pretty darn good alternative that will appeal to people. And interestingly, out of this crisis, one hasn't really seen that much debate about the alternatives. Maybe I've missed it, but I haven't seen really practical agendas for long-term alternatives to be constructed, or have they been? Have I missed something?
Totally agree with you that if anything, this crisis will not be only the crisis of capitalism, which will have to reinvent itself in a more social solidarity way, whatever, but also it's the moment of truth for the left. It simply, I'm the first to admit it, it doesn't have an alternative. What was the only really big leftist movement worldwide in the last decades? The Porto Alegre, Seattle, and so on movement. But they don't really have a positive alternative, except some vague ideas about movements, people's self-organization, resist imperialism, and so on and so on. Nobody has the alternative. Incidentally, this is why the left is getting more and more moralistic and legalistic. Because they don't have a positive alternative, they think in how horrible that people are starving in Africa, blah, blah, moralist terms, plus the only solution they can think is some stupid, more politically correct legislation, like, you know, tougher laws against racists, blah, blah, and so on. That's desperate.
One winner out of this might be the moderate left. You know how the ancient battle on the left between the Social Democrats and the Communists, which has just in some ways been more fierce than between the Communists and the Capitalists. The Social Democrats probably come out of this quite well, don't they? Because they basically accept capitalism, but they want to water it down, a little bit more regulation, a little bit gentler. Isn't that perhaps where we go now?
Basically, I agree with you, because I think that some kind of socialist version of capitalism, with a little more of solidarity, whatever, will have to be reinvented. In this sense, yes. But nonetheless, if you still are, and I am, an old hardcore leftist, it's pretty sad when what you are basically saying is that the big task of the left is to save capitalism and render it more operative. That's where we are today, de facto. What I fear is that a genuinely new model has emerged. A model which, on the one hand, is at its economic level of capitalist explosion, even more dynamic, explosively productive than our Western capitalism, but at the same time, it fits more authoritarian political life like fish in the water. That is what should worry us. We lost, democracy lost, whatever costs come with it, this automatic support in capitalism.
We need to leave it there. Slavoj Zizek, thank you very much indeed.